videos, legal animations, and so forth, and legal multisensorization, legal virtual realities, humanoid robots for legal purposes. It was, and still is, crucial to make all these subject matters accessible not only to the legal community, but also to the general public. In 2014, I organized the International Conference on Multisensory Law at the University of Zurich. Perhaps my own publications and presentations and those of other legal scholars and practitioners will one day allow for funding of large research projects.
I'm sure you can all agree with me that we should do something to get this woman some funding. So Adrian will talk to that in a moment. The next question, how do you see the future of legal visualization? And do you think the comic book contracts are here to stay?
It is difficult, if not impossible, to predict the future of a scholarly subject matter. In any case, it depends on who is concerned with it, where, when, to what end, and with which effect. With a few exceptions, most law schools have not institutionalized this subject so far. In other words, it is not formally recognized yet to a greater extent. The legal tech movement could give some impulses in this direction. Since the topic has an analog dimension to, for instance, analog legal visualizations such as comic book contracts drawn with colored pencils or felt pens, pertinent impulses must come from other branches of law, such as legal iconography, legal theory, legal sociology, legal psychology, law and economics, law and literature, and so forth. As to whether comic book contracts are here to stay, that is even more difficult to venture a prognosis. It would be essential to integrate this topic into the canon of the established legal disciplines. Hence, we need to ask to which established legal disciplines this subject matter refers. As long as this topic lacks academic embedding, it will meet great difficulties to hold its ground on a larger scale. There are interfaces with law and comic literature, law in comics, law as comic, legal iconography, legal theory, contract law, and so forth.
So I'm going to do some shameless promoting of our law school now, because when we first dialogued with Colette about this interview, she said that there were no curricula anywhere in the world that embedded comic book contracts into their curriculum, and I could then tell her that our own Robin Carroll, who's sitting right there, very graciously has allowed me to come in and take some of her contract law lectures. So our law students are now being confronted with this alarming notion that they might have to draw or work with people who can draw in order to try and negotiate contracts in the future. And since then, the Monash Business School have also taken up our curriculum suggestions, and they're teaching it too. So it is spreading, it is coming into law schools. But the point is well taken for the academics amongst you, or those who have academic connections. innovation in law really has to start in law schools if it's going to be sustainable and long term. We have to reach the next generation. We have to try and teach them what we think can be done better, not just what is already being done. Otherwise, how are they going to be able to take the baton and run with it? So I think that's a very, very good point that she's making there. So the next question is, so why are we so prone to just words? What does it take to break the convention of legal
Mein
verbal-
Paper, Tabuzone juristischer Reflexion zum Mangel an Bildern, die geltend rechtliche Inhalte visualisieren, which can be translated as Taboo Zone of Legal Reflection on the Shortage of Images Visualizing Contents of the Applicable Law, argues why lawyers have a verbocentric attitude and behave accordingly. Law schools socialize future lawyers in a verbocentric way, while teaching them that both legal scholarship and practice amount to verbal language alone. Most law students are not prone to question how they are socialized. They accept the social rule that law is language and do not defy it. Thus, particularly younger visual legal scholars run the risk of being marginalized and ruining their academic career. In order to break the verbocentric social rule, law professors need to change their attitude and study further, especially extramuros. Outside pressure from bar associations, judges associations, associations of in-house lawyers, and so forth might contribute to changing the verbocentric mindsets of those responsible for legal education.
So earlier today, I think we touched on the point that it doesn't just happen in law school, it happens in school. I think it was Stuart who made that point earlier. We're building an intellectual culture of verbocentricity, a word I was not familiar with until I met Colette. But it's really, really interesting. It doesn't have to be this way. So I was very fascinated by this verbocentricity. So I asked her, well, what made her such a multi-central legal rebel? And her response is very cheap.
My forthcoming paper, How I Became a Multisensory Legal Rebel, will describe why and how I gradually transcended the verbocentric legal mindset. Hence, I'm referring you to this paper. There would be much more to be said, but I think I need to stop here by giving the floor to the participants of the Comic and Creative Contract Conference 2017.
Thank you. So that is, of course, her paper for this conference, is that what she's submitting to come out of this is how I became a multisensory lawyer and no longer a verbocentric one. It's such a wonderful title. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So she says that she's quite happy for me to take any questions if I have an email form, so you can email them to me, send it to her, and then we will see if we can get dialogues going. That's absolutely fine. So yeah, I'm very grateful to her for pitching in. And I hope that you enjoyed it. She's a very unique person, and I've very much enjoyed my conversations with her. She's a keeper. So Adrian, so for the final section, before we can all go home, sorry, you had a question?
Yeah, so well, maybe if you want to email her a question, I would like to know.
Can you send it to me in email? But yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think she's done such important work
Yes.
to make it available. If there's any plans to make her work available in English.
So she's beginning to make some of her papers And on that note, isn't it a beautiful segue? So I've taken a page out of Jenny's book. So why don't you think a little bit about what a multisensory lawyer could be? And maybe talk to the person next to you for a minute. What is a multisensory lawyer? Thank you. Your multi-sensory explorations will continue. But we now have the CFC up and running, so that's excellent. For those of you who don't know Adrian, this is Adrian Keating. He is sometimes known as my pet engineer, although I don't think he likes that. But without Adrian, we would not be here today, because it was Adrian who prompted the UWA Makers contract, who made me get into this in the first place. Very inspired by Helena Scholarship. So, yeah, fabulous. It's all his fault, really.
So it's not really, it's a team.
But we are a team,
so,
very much. And we work together amazing. I think we got an IQ Award nomination because the idea of an engineer and a lawyer working together is so novel that just deserves some kind of a recognition. So we've been thinking a lot about fundraising, and Adrian's going to talk about that now.
Yeah, so this is just some ideas we've had around this, because there's some repeating themes that we're trying to figure out, and the big one is, how does anyone get funding to do this? Right? So we've come up with this kind of proposal that we're looking at, which we're calling a Consortium Advancing Law Through Visualisation, and ACALTV is the simplest version. I just want to go off on a slight tangent for a moment, that this stuff we've been talking about with comics has been done in lots of different fields. Actually, there's one electricity, there's a manga book, there's one of my colleagues pointed me to a database one. So there's this whole, really interesting approach of getting ideas across through comics and visualization that we're talking about here, but it's actually been done in Japan's great example of
But I think that's
culture
what,
that's using it.
was it you, Stuart, who was talking about the culture of Japan is very visual, and maybe that's why they're so happy to use visual prompts in their law as well?
So it's an excellent to leverage off there. So what we're thinking about is, how do we again meet this final goal? How do we simplify an agreement between a couple of people? But we've got to do that with limited resources and limited dollars. And what we need, well, there's all these barriers, and for a start, it's getting this group of people together, lawyer, a non-lawyer, visualizer, a problem giver, and someone who can evaluate how well you solve that problem.
So if I just cut in, it's brilliant for us to have somebody like John Morricon, an innovation manager in the world's largest engineering company, who comes in and says, yeah, I can fund you, that's great. That's wonderful, and we're very, very privileged to have that. But how many small companies are going to benefit from that? Well, maybe he'll blaze a trail, and maybe their innovations will come out of that, but they're not going to have the benefit of his team, his internal graphic artist teams, and all the people that work for him, and all the people that have worked on that contract to make it happen. So we need to, and we already have a really good research team here, but we need to find a way of engaging companies that can't afford to go to a university with a checkbook and say, how much do you want?
And on a single company basis, we solve the problem, but we don't solve the bigger problem. So the idea of the mission of the consortium, what we're talking about, is to create a visualization knowledge base that provides a generic framework that allows contracts and legal documents to be produced that are quite complex, but that can address core risks of a particular organisation. And so here's my little visualisation of what it might look like, and it's overly simplistic, but you can imagine, right, you've got a contract between person A and company B, and the type of contract is an employment contract, and there's a number of core risks that we want to try and address, and there's some process by which the knowledge base can bring in all the previous expertise that's been used to generate a framework that a number of different groups can leverage off.
So we already have some of those thumbnails that the beautiful and wonderful Louis has already created for us for use in different contexts that can be used in so many different areas. And I've noticed that when we were looking at some of Robert's contracts that were new, I recognized some of the images, because why shouldn't they be used again? It doesn't make sense not to. We reuse words, so why not reuse images if we're going to restate the same basic legal principles? So, yeah.
And Thomas Barton made this concept of how can you create these bespoke contracts? I mean, they're just too expensive. But if you can have a framework, a knowledge base that you can draw on to create a template for each particular case, maybe you can eventually solve. We're talking long-term solutions here, but how do you get there? And can you make that solution scalable? And again, another great term that Thomas used. So what we're talking about is an organisation that can, or a consortium that can bring together supporters, and we're talking about kind of 3 levels of supporters. You know, level 3 being supporting membership, maybe just smaller companies that have a small amount of financial support, institutional membership from larger organisations, and then corporate membership that can maybe bring in organisations that see value in building this kind of platform, but don't want to invest a bucket load of money, but have a small pot of money that they see as willing to contribute on a yearly basis. And using that, you know, we form a consortium that can create a format like this and bring a number of...
So the bigger companies also have very valuable resources that are not money.
Yeah.
They have teams, they have experts, they have people who might have worked with this before in a different context, and they're also very important for the consortium to work. It's about knowledge and sharing.
So again, what is it? The value proposition? You get the skill base of this community of people who know how to create these kind of contracts. You know, there's the workshops, seminars, webinars. This visualization knowledge base that everyone within the consortium can leverage and use and fine-tune those concepts. Take the contribution of members and those contracts into that knowledge base, and again make these scalable bespoke solutions. I love that terminology. The target, in particular, key risks, and again, this concept of risk assessment of larger contracts, and I'll talk more about risk assessment tomorrow with my talk. And again, storyboarding of these contracts, which is an important part. So we're talking, again, beyond this membership, the path to getting there is not going to be a short-term solution, so I look at these kind of 3 phases. Phase 1, where we kind of want to call for people who are interested and believe this is perhaps a good approach to form a larger group who might be able to achieve something.
And we already have 1 member.
Yeah.
We're excited about that.
There you go. One is a group.
Well, we're in it too.
Yeah, that's right. Phase 2, where we might develop a simple prototype and go through some kind of review or evaluation. And step 3, phase 3, where we're looking at development of visual contract builder that could be a platform that could be used and deployed in a number of different organisations.
And there's a lot of interplay there with James Hazard and the Common Accord language project that does that for words in law. I would love to work with him on pictures in law, and we've been talking about that as well. So, yeah, exciting stuff.
So that's really just the main pitch. It's you know, thoughts. Does anyone have?
We'd love to hear your thoughts
about similar types of things? Yeah.
We brought this to our research development officers, and they went, "You want to what?" This isn't something that's common for universities as a way of trying to get people together in research projects. But I think, and this is all Adrian's idea, and I think it's a great way of trying to drive change in a profession, because what we will also be able to do is we'll be able to provide educational material for people who want to work on curriculum. So we can have universities be part of this consortium and help them with their curriculum in trying to teach students novel approaches in contract law, novel approaches in law teaching, and visualization as part of legal education. So I think it has a lot of scope, but it's scary because it's new and it's different, and I don't know that anyone's ever done anything like this before. So we'd love to hear your thoughts. You don't have to give them now. It's been a long day. If you have them now, great. Okay, Adrian wants to hear them now.
I've actually just been assigned a project to do what they call a clause bank, which is a set of clauses that if you were doing a bespoke contract across the Commonwealth, you're supposed to use those clauses. And I had already written down today, could we have a in that clause bank, could we have a version of each of the clauses in pictorial form? And we may be able to help to drive this a little faster perhaps than you would be able to otherwise.
That would be lovely.
Can't
We
promise.
have a whole
Haven't
team.
run it up the flagpole yet, but I think we can probably get some buy-in for at least the concept.
It'd be great. We have a whole team ready to go on that, so it'd be great.
So yeah, let us again have a think about it. Tell us.
Are we nuts?
Tell us we're nuts. Tell us how it's going to fail.
I'd be interested in knowing more about, you had a line in there about fine-tuning visualizations. Because it seems to me, without knowing where the different visualizations for repetitive clauses come in, how those are made, if you're getting an army of different illustrators to build some of those, it seems to me that to build a contract out of those different visualizations would be effectively like grabbing these different clauses but then setting them all in separate fonts. You know, so it could be very clamorous visually.
Could be.
You would want somebody
To drive it.
to go over that again. I mean, you would save enormous amounts of time in that regard, and that the concepts would be there visually. But I suspect you'd want to have somebody go over them in the same style, visual style.
So I think
for it to look coherent.
that upfront planning about what it should look like is so important, right? And again, that's where having lots of input before you start, you know, what is it? Measure once, cut many. Oh yeah, it's the other way. But so yeah, if we do it the right way, you know, we can stop making those different fonts.
And that's why I was so particularly excited to get you and your colleagues here today, Stuart, because we need to reach the broader visual graphic community as well.
Well,
That the comic makers.
one of the things that's really been key for me in my research is some writing from W.J.T. Mitchell. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but if you want somebody to read in terms of a philosophy of picturing, he's your go-to guy.
Write that down, Michael.
And he makes the separation in definitions, which I know you lawyers are all over definitions, between image, and you can do this in English, it's not so easy in other languages, but the definition of image as a separate thing to picture. And what he says is an image can come from two places, right? You can see it with your eyes, and you can imagine it in your head, and that's it. But a picture is how you fix that down. So you can take a photograph of an image you see with your eyes, but you can also draw it. And you can draw it in a whole range of ways. So very realistic, hyper-real way, right through to a stick figure at the other end. And how you draw that will have a huge bearing on what the thing means. And some of the things we've discussed earlier about the specificity of the people you're picturing. You know, you'll be able to see, if it's realistic, you'll be able to see their gender and their age, their ethnicity straight away. But if you make a stick figure or, you know, SKCD comics we were talking about earlier, all those considerations go out the window. It's much more universal.
So that is, it's so important to be thinking about those things, and we're going to talk a lot about those in the workshop tomorrow, hopefully. And God, I hope you're going to be there.
Yes.
Because one of the things we learned, it sounds really banal, but when Louis joined the team, the process just changed. I mean, it's so obvious that in order to illustrate, you need an illustrator, but we just thought we could come up with an image in our heads, because, you know, how hard can it be? It's really hard.
To put a corporate element to that, brand seems to be a key benefit of this, which you sort of lose. So if you can separate what we're trying to convey from how we convey it, even within the imagery area, that'll help getting corporates on board, I think.
But just tell me what we need to do to get Telstra on board, and I'll do that. Thomas.
In fundraising, I would ask her, well, what's the community of interest? And one thing that just pops into my mind is, if I'm China or Japan or Korea, I might, the trade development agencies, the governmental agencies of those countries might be very interested in developing a common vocabulary of images, simply because they're more accessible to their own populations whose English might be more limited. So those Asian countries may really see this as a way of, you know, harmonizing their business approaches with the West or something like that. In that, creating that common vocabulary. I don't know. And then we've got money.
Iconograms are fantastic and they're universal, and everyone knows what a bathroom looks like internationally, right? There's a set of symbols, right? And could you have a set of symbols that could represent that at an international level?
Yeah, and apart from that, if you had brought them in as partners, you would avoid any kind of cultural dissonance in the images that you're creating, and have things that really worked well for their cultures.
Because the cultural idiosyncrasies in the imagery is really beginning to get stark as we start to cross borders with images that we create. So it's such a good idea. We've talked a little bit to DFAT about what they would like us to do. So there are conversations that are happening, but we hadn't thought of going directly to the other governments.
There's history of these kinds of projects. The isotype stuff from the 20s and 30s, Otto Neurath.
I'd love to nod and look like I knew stuff,
Right.
but
And there are people kind of continuing that research. David Skopek in Berlin, for example. So these things are kind of ongoing.
So
There's
we have a lot
international
to learn.
picture languages. Yeah.
we have a lot to learn about picture language. We're lawyers. We're just beginning to break down our silos, but we welcome your knowledge. Very much so. Thank you.
I just wanted to throw in, I don't have the answer to this, but in understanding how, have you looked at the graphic medicine movement? And it is another field where specificity is very, very important. Being accurate and specific in your language is very important. And there's a whole field of graphic medicine that has grown and grown and grown. So, and it has made its way into the education system, into medical schools.
Okay. So obviously you have to look at that.
Just
It's a
thinking of
great
how
idea. Thank you.
disciplines have embraced and begin to embed.
But again, it's all about removing those silos and trying to learn from the other disciplines. Lawyers are notoriously bad because we don't normally do that, but there's so much scope for learning and knowledge and innovation.
Medicine's pretty bad too.
But if they can do it, and
Yeah,
we haven't
you
done
can
it,
do
maybe
it.
that's a way of shaming law into medicine. I've done it. Come on. Lawyers and medicine have been adversaries for years. Awesome, thank you, that's a great suggestion. Are there any other thoughts or feedback? We're obviously very welcome to give it to us over dinner or coffee tomorrow, or if inspiration strikes, please just let us know. For now, I'll just wrap up today and thank you for what I think has been an absolutely fantastic set of contributions from everyone. So thank you so much. Pat yourself on the back. You've all done great questions, great engagement. What a lovely crowd. And I will see you at dinner at 6:30 at the Oricon offices. The address is on the program on the pinboard and on the program that I sent to you in your email. So thank you very much and thank you for
No, I'm not.